think you asked a really good question there about the German interest in this. Right now, the German economic interest and the German foreign policy interests are not aligned. What's clearly best for the German economy is to have cheap natural gas powering its industries, even if it comes from Russian pipelines. And they no longer have that anymore. In fact, they may never have that again. So they're going to pay a very high price economically, maybe forever. And remember, their whole economy is based on industry. They're a very industrial power. So if this war drags on for a long time, I think Scholz might be in some political trouble precisely because he's gone along with the Americans on this. And there is a growing political opposition to this war inside of Germany.
I don't think that there's much of an incentive or a motivation to back down because this conflict creates a significant amount of debt owed back to the U.S. It creates a potential future asset stream, creates a realignment of power. Everyone's looking externally as internal, economic conflict and wealth disparity issues arise, and economic growth is challenged, and inflation is soaring. It's a great place to, address one's energy. So I think all of this stuff is detailed analytical shenanigans around who's saying what or who's doing what. I think the underlying thesis and the underlying river that's flowing is one that's like looking for external conflict. I think the same is true with the U.S. and China. And
you're talking about the military-industrial complex is going to benefit massively from this. The longer this drags out, the more the conflict in Taiwan heats up, the more we're going to invest in our military.
We often talk about these things as if they're like top-down, like master plan driven. And as we all know, like they're more Ouija board driven. It's a bunch of guys that got their hand on the Ouija board and they're all just had a little too much caffeine. And in this case, I think it's just more about like everyone's a little anxious and the anxiety's leading to a desire for more conflict. We're not happy at home. If you're happy at home, you're not looking externally for conflict. That's true in nearly every developed nation on earth today. That's it. I don't know. It's pretty simple.
I like your position.
I think it's a great take. I think it's a great take,
good take.
Actually.
Hot take, yeah.
I think there are a lot of interests who benefit from war, and I think the foreign policy establishment is funded by those interests, and it's kind of wired for war, at least in terms of the reflex, right?
I saw a couple military leaders give a talk a few months ago. It was in a private thing, so it wasn't on public record. What was striking to me in this particular thing where these guys were being interviewed on stage at like a dinner thing, and they were so oriented around their next steps in escalation. And I think it speaks to the point, Sachs. Like, none of them were thinking about, like, where are we at today? How do we de-escalate? When is this going to get... There was no conversation at all from anyone about resolution or de-escalation. With every single one of them, it was all about, like, my orientation for getting bigger, going deeper, going harder, going stronger, making this thing bigger. And I think that was really scary to me because I didn't hear anyone having a conversation around, like, how do we...
You have to follow the financial incentives. When the last time we looked at this, right, Leon Panetta and all these other guys who were screaming for war, they were getting paid by the military-industrial complex. I remember when Lloyd Austin was nominated as defense secretary, he had some conflict issues because he was just on the board of Northrop Grumman or one of these big military-industrial companies. And so, of course, these generals have to push for war because as long as they're girding for war, they're guaranteed to have, for them, a very lucrative job once they leave the military.
The Ouija board, though, Sachs, and I'll throw it to you, maybe you can keep this metaphor going. The media's got their hands on it. They want ratings. You have the energy industrial complex in this German conflict who seeks to benefit massively if people invest in renewables, or you find other, oil, off Norway. Norway's oil is one of the largest reserves that's untapped. So you have this Ouija board, media, energy, and the military-industrial complex all moving it at once. Maybe you can speak to that analogy.
And everyone wants to move it to the side of the Ouija board that says escalate. There are very few people that have the energy to move it to the other side that says de-escalate.
It's not profitable. De-escalation means less energy, less investment. So, yeah, you're going to go escalate.